Hello everyone and welcome back to Fanfiction Friday. Today I'm here with a much shorter story because that last one took a long time to get out. And this one's only 5 chapters long. Okay, the one we'll be reading is Time Back Time by the Taco Whites. Summary. The final battle against Infinite led to the destruction of Green Hill. Amy Rose remembers that fateful day. Okay, let's see. Chapter 1. Okay, hold on. Mercury was in retrograde. She had been mapping the stars every night, memorizing them, as she looked up at the velvet of the night sky. It had become her nightly routine, climbing onto Hedgehog's Pass and staring up at the skies, scanning the stars for an answer she knew she would never get. Why her? Why did she have to survive when Infinite wiped out the whole of Green Hills? All her friends had fallen that day. Volunteers from the other towns arrived, a little too late to help, but what they did was bury each of the heroes that had fallen while bringing Infinite down. Knuckles, Tails, Rouge, Cream, Espio, Chimey, Vector, and Sonic. The rest of the town was buried in mass burial sites. Amy had been too ashamed to help with the burials. She felt like a coward. She didn't want to say goodbye to them, because this one was the last one. This one meant forever. Instead, she looked up at the stars every night, hoping to see some sign that her friends were out there, that they were at peace, that they had forgiven her for surviving. She closed her eyes tightly, yet a tear sneaked out, trailing down her face. As alone as her, the memories of the final battle were still fresh in her head. Knuckles had been the first to fall. He had punched Ifrit in the Phantom Ruby while Knuckles attacked with his spin, while Sonic attacked with his spin dashes to keep Infinite distracted long enough for Knuckles to take his shot. The ruby shattered. A fiery laser shot out its cracks before imploding and ricocheting in every direction, killing everyone in its wake. Rouge screamed and caught Knuckles before his lifeless body hit the ground. The second wave hit her square on the chest. Cream and Tails fell from the skies. Vector, Espio, and Chimey were fighting the battle bots. They would have never known what killed them. Okay, I'm guessing Sonic also died from the explosion. Probably along with Eggman or something, because they're never mentioned. I'm guessing this Infinite also died in this. Anyway, a flash of green appeared in front of Amy as she watched the red wave of death approach her. Warm hands grabbed her, and the two of them warped twice before the wave cut up and hit him, not before he threw her into the river. From under the water, she looked up and saw his brownish red eyes look down to meet her before the waves spread out. The wall fractured, and she blacked out. She choked on a sob. The tears were now streaming freely down her face. He had mouthed, "I'm sorry," and she had never told him, not once, that she loved him. Yet, even at death's doorstep, he had apologized. She didn't even want to know what he meant, that their days of walking together in the rain had been sliced to a halt by a sharp night of a short life, that the evenings they spent baking together would be a thing of the past, that his kisses would be nothing more than a memory, his gentle caresses along her back on the lazy Sunday afternoon they spent together watching yet another horrible romantic comedy, all basking in the comfort of each other's presence, his shy smile, his dry text, the way he rolled his eyes whenever she brought up Sonic in their conversations, and his smell, his lavender and leather scent. She was sobbing harder now. Or did he apologize for not being good enough? For not being as fast as Sonic? She wished she could go back and tell him how much he meant to her, that he was never the distraction she claimed she needed, rather she was truly in love with him, that he had taught her what it meant to love and be loved, how safe he had made her feel, how grateful she was that he remembered the little things, that she liked strawberry shortcake, that she had her coffee with a lot of cream and sugar. He had even found the chocolate she spoke of enjoying when she was a child whilst on a holiday with her parents. He tracked down the little artistic store to contents away just for her to relive the memory, but the years chasing Sonic had left her afraid of rejection of her true feelings. If only she hadn't been a coward. They never found his body. They said the river had probably pulled him into the sea, and that she was lucky she had surfaced and crawled onto land before she had passed out. When they put up the monument of heroes, she begged Sally to include him, but reports of him being on Amphit's side had been found. She repeated and cried out that those were merely clones of him, but no one listened. It was easier to believe that Shadow the Hedgehog was one of the darkness, that savior of light, and now memories of him were all she had. Note: I'm sorry. Okay, chapter 2. You don't understand, he hissed, crushing the soda can in his hand till it crumbled. Marisa, who had been questioning him for the last half an hour, wanted to agree. He was right. She did not understand. The Coast Guard had pulled him out of the water an hour ago, cold and unmoving, till he choked out the water and started screaming. Where is she? Where is she? Except he had no idea who he was from, or even the name of the female he was screaming about. She made a note about his strength on her notepad and looked him over again. They had handcuffed him to the table for her protection, but with the extent of the power he seemed to have, she was sure that those handcuffs would not prevent him from destroying and killing anything within a 50-mile radius if he wanted to. Another note she added to her comment about how dangerous he could be. He did not want to hurt people. Is it true, Mr. Hedgehog? She surveyed him over her half-moon glasses. So enlighten me. How did you survive underwater for so long? The doctor on call when they rescued you said that your body showed signs of being submerged for at least 6 months. Yet here you are. Half an hour later, you look perfectly fine. Care to explain? He tilted his head and stared at her, his lips curled to a side, and he sneered. Well, aren't you the brain expert? Shouldn't you know why someone who's probably been underwater for 6 months can't remember anything? She blinked. Once, twice. Touché. Mr. Hedgehog, please, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm trying to help you. Miss Cat, he interrupted, leaning forward, his left wrist snapping out of the handcuffed easily, but he didn't even notice. All you helped me do is to realize how pathetically compromised my life is because I can't remember anything. Yet you ask me again and again and again, expecting a different answer every damn time. Melissa chewed on her lower lip, increasingly concerned that she had rattled the ebony hedgehog more than she could have. She couldn't hide the worry so plainly written across her face. The hedgehog smirked triumphantly. And you call yourself a doctor? Pathetic. How can I answer your damn questions when I can't even remember my own name? He scoffed. The other handcuff snapped off his lips as he moved towards the glass window panels and stared out at the seaside. Melissa looked at took the moment to observe him. His face was pulled into a painful grimace as he seemed to battle his demons within. He must have loved her greatly, the woman he was looking for. Tell me how I can help you, she said quietly, walking up behind him, tilting her head to analyze his reaction. He seemed surprised as he tore his glance away from the view and looked down at her. She had to force herself to avoid a shudder as his gaze seemed to penetrate into her very soul. Reddish brown eyes, lined with red, sitting on an ebony frame, handsome in a way that was devastatingly so, eyes that could unleash hell, and with the subtle show of strength she had seen, she didn't doubt he could. You want to help me? He sounded skeptical, then smirked. Get me out of here, then. Melissa felt her throat constrict. There was only one way in which she could get him out, if she went along with him, but to trust him was a gamble. He had a reserve of unfathomable power, which he could not remember. He did not even know who he was, what he had done, but she found that she was not afraid of him. I'll get you out. Follow me. I'll help you. She turned and walked towards the door and realized he hadn't followed her. She looked over her shoulder with a frown. He was staring at her with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. But you're afraid of me, he said plainly and ran his gloved hands to his quills, frustrated. Why would you help me? Because, she hesitated and then met his piercing gaze with a firm resolve. I know that you're not going to hurt me. He shut his eyes and let a slow chuckle. Oh, how sweet, he smirked and walked up behind her. She began to lead him towards the car park. Attendants and doctors greet them along the way, but no one cares to question them. There was an incident at Green Hill around 6 months ago. Perhaps if we drive along there, you might remember something, she informed him as she unlocked her car and he slid into the back seat. His face was blank, as though the name had not reminded him of anything, and she sighed. It was worth a visit if it helped him heal. She realized then with sudden unease that he nicked a leather jacket off someone while they were leaving the hospital and put it on, but decided not to question it. Perhaps this was not the best idea, traveling with the absolute powerhouse of a man with no memories and no clear ability to feel pain. She felt less brave now, slipping into her driver's seat and buckling her seatbelt. Do you know why you don't feel me, Miss Cat? His voice drawn, soft, deep, and touched deadly. She stared straight ahead and swallowed unwillingly to expose any trace of her growing alarm. She didn't answer. Because I haven't hurt you yet. The words were so utterly terrifying, but laced with amusement, followed by a little giggle. She took in a sharp breath and peeked at him through the rear-view mirror with a doctor's curiosity, only to see him smile and wink at her with an uncharacteristic air of innocence, proud of the little joke he had made. Oh, great. A powerful psychopath with a dry sense of humor. Just what she needed. Okay, Chapter 3. Melissa the cat frowned at her notepad and looked over at the article she was reading on her phone. The Green Hill catastrophe. It didn't make sense to be heading there. There were no survivors, but she couldn't find any other incident within the last year that could have resulted in a living, breathing hedgehog surfacing at Seaside City after being submerged for an extensive period. The ebony and red hedgehog in question was still at the gas station supermarket. She checked her watch and looked over at the supermarket. It had been 5 minutes. She would give him 5 more before she went in to check on what he was doing. The $50 she had gave him would be quite enough to purchase anything he wanted, and maybe a solo trip would help unlock the dam of memories his brain seemed to be holding back. But it didn't seem to be doing anything much to help him, as she had noticed the top of his head circling aimlessly around the store till he came into view again, holding a small bag in his hand, and something caught his attention as he stopped moving. She squinted, readjusting her glasses, wondering what on earth had gone him frozen stiff. Wait, was he holding a bag of coffee beans? She sighed as she got out of the car, pulling her beige jacket close and making for the store. The ice wind nipped her cheeks as she cringed. She was neither an outdoorsy person nor did she like the cold, but she had a patient who required her help, a patient who could not remember that you could purchase a cup of coffee instead of a bag of coffee beans. She shook her head at herself as she stepped in, graceful for the warmth of the store and thought of a warm cup of coffee. She walked up beside him and looked up at him. He was stiff, his face blank, unblinking. He didn't even notice she was standing beside him. She followed his line of sight and realized he was staring at a claw machine full of stuffed toys and many variety colors. She smiled to herself. Perhaps this was a start, a breakthrough. Mr. Hedgehog, she said gently, placing her back gloved hand on his arm. He started and turned, staring down just as hard at her. His gaze made her want to curl up under her jacket and hide, but she had to help him. She reminded herself. Would you like a go? She nodded at the claw machine. He saw them blink suddenly uncertain. May I? He asked with such a polite quietness that her heart ached for him. Of course, smiled the old cat, trying to take the bag of coffee beans from him, but he patted. No, wait! Don't worry, Mr. Hedgehog. I'll get you some real coffee. Yeah, you don't understand. I need them. She paused after a moment, nodded. All right, let me buy it for you, she smiled again. He followed Melissa to the cashier. She'd taken the $50 she had given him, yet it was not enough. The coffee beans were a premium kind. Her brows bulged shot up, but she paid the difference and purchased 5 tokens for the claw machine. Well, wherever the hedgehog had been, he truly did have a taste for the finer things in life. He was walking puzzled that she was determined to solve. He was a walking puzzle that she determined to solve. She watched him from afar, waiting for him to finish with the claw machine. She smiled as she watched his eyes light up with joy. He won 4 of the 5 times he played. Something at the moment rippled out of a band-aid on a wound in her heart that had not healed. Perhaps it would never. Melissa blinked away the tears and looked away as the ebony hedgehog returned victorious, clutching his prizes. Shall we leave, Mr. Hedgehog? He found, looking at her, confused. Miss Cat, have I upset you? He sounded concerned, getting into his spot at the back of the car and fleeing on one of his prizes, a blue stuffed hedgehog plushie, to the other hand. She smiled as she shook her head, turned on the ignition, and began to pull away from the gas station. Then why are you crying? He asked, agitated and impotent. He was an impotent. She picked up her pen instinctively and jotted it down at a side of her notepad before focusing on the world. A memory of someone long gone, Mr. Hedgehog? She forced herself to smile as she met his eyes through the rearview mirror. The answer didn't seem to convince him, but he did not question her further. A while passed, and she peeled to observe him again. He was fast asleep, cuddling the plush of the bat, a pink hedgehog, and the toy robot he had won. Yet the plushie lay abandoned, far away from him as possible. The lump in her throat returned. She forced herself to look away. She could not afford to think of her son. Not now. She needed to help this young man. There was something about him that made her reluctant to give up his case, even though the other doctors had signed off on him. Yes, she was spending her time and her own money. She would also be in trouble when the hospital realized that she had let her patient off without the proper clearance. But they would not be able to contact her. Her phone was on silent and she would not answer, no matter the consequence, because he needed help, and she would help him. That, that's what Liam... Miss Cat, he suddenly awoke, and she almost jumped off his skin, striking the car quickly, grateful that they were on an empty open road. Before I forget, he passed a small beige scarf, and before she could ask him, I saw at the store you seemed cold, so I thought I would get it for you. Her heart warmed once more, and she smiled at him through the rearview mirror, observing him much on the coffee beans now. Strange. Mr. Hedgehog, that is very kind of you. How did you pay for it? A moment silence, he answered meekly. I didn't. Oh. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be. He was dead, but it looked so much like him. Who was he with? A cat? An older cat? If it was him, if he had survived, why had he not returned? Why did he stay away for so long? 6 months. 6 months long. And why was he here now? The cat looked cold. She was tugging at her coat as she wished it would swallow her up. Wait, did he put his arms around her? What were they saying? It can't be him. It can't be her shadow. No, she refused to believe it, but she would keep an eye on those strangers from where she was well hidden. From her perch on top of the ruined bakery, behind a mossy covered water tanker, and Amy would wait. Oh, tension seemed to rise, and we had reached the final chapter. Okay. This is our water, okay. He reminded her more of Liam than ever, with him towering beside her and offering her warm comfort in the middle of the eerie ruins of a once beautiful town. A town Liam had always loved before the accident. No, she reminded herself, don't think of him. Don't falter. This young man needs you now. They walked through. A shudder ran down her back as she looked around the desolate wreckage of a hospital as they made their way through the rubble. Her patient seemed undisturbed by the debris for the most part, trudging through the scene like he was used to it, making Melissa wonder for about the 100th time what the ebony hedgehog used to be. He stopped suddenly as his hold on her shoulder pulled her back with a bite of strength that Melissa winced. His brows knotted as he looked around with a sudden sense of ferocity, making Melissa wish she had never gotten involved with this walking nightmare of power and occasional fluff. What is it, Mr. Hedgehog? She squealed softly, praying he would let go of her shoulder. He noticed her distress and smirked at her, letting go of her shoulder immediately. Still afraid of me, I see, he teased her, chuckling. Don't worry, Miss Melissa. I quite enjoy your company. Besides, he turned to scan the surroundings. There's someone else here, watching us. He glanced over his shoulder and laughed at her increased alarm. They had spent enough time together for him to realize that the term scaredy cat was not an ill-suited expression. He had also learned how abuse his knowledge for his own amusement. Melissa would jump at the slight surprise ever since he realized he could warp things that had been more interesting for the pair of them. Well, at least for him. Mr. Hedgehog, please do not tease me so. Her pitch grew higher as she continued to panic. With a look, Miss Melissa, it's only ghosts. Don't you fret. He chuckled again, wiping up to a higher point to get a better look around. Melissa continued to panic even more now, but he could clearly see her from where he stood. In spite of being a constant Shadow would not let any harm befall her. She was a good woman, kind. She didn't deserve to have lost her only family, a boy that she had adopted years ago, a child that she had raised like her own son and had buried with her own hands. She had told him the story while she drove him here. It had moved him, the fact that he reminded her of a child she had loved, a son she had lost. He felt a sort of kinship to her in a way. She had lost everything the world had meant to her. He had lost every meaning of the world to her, and then he saw it. A movement in the wreckage behind Melissa. Someone was moving towards Roy. No, he snarled, wiping immediately. His fingers curled around a soft neck. Beautiful green eyes stared into his own with a mixture of disbelief, recognition, and something else, and they began to line with tears. Shadow? He assailing last, clawing his grip on her throat through the wound's white gloves. Shadow? Shadow? Was that his name? He loosened his grip and dropped her like she'd burned him in some way, stepping back as she took in her coughing, hankering state. Who are you? He snarled, his voice icing. Do you know me? She looked up at him, her hand on her bruised throat. As she drew her head back and laughed in almost a maniacal fashion. Of course, you had to lose your memories again. She stood up slowly and dragged her feet, walking up to him. He stepped back again, hitting the cold stone wall behind him. She drew her face close to him in a manner that both left him frozen and aligned. From the corner of his eyes, he submerged her horror to the scene and watched on, terrified. I'm Amy. I'm your Rose. Her voice was a quiet whisper. She leaned in, placing the lightest kisses on his lips. Time stopped. The world stopped. His head quaked with a sudden sharp spike of pain as he fell to his knees, shaking. Memories flooded through him with the force of a tsunami. She knelt down beside him, her hands on his shoulders. Shadow? He looked up, tears dripping down his face as he slowly lifted his hands to his soft cheeks, tracing the tightness that now lined her face. Rose, he exhaled. He cupped her cheeks, gentle and fearful, as though she would disappear into nothingness. His thumb traced the curves of her lower lip, and she closed her eyes tightly, yet the tears sneaked out, pouring down her cheeks suddenly. There you go. There you are. Oh, God. Amy. Thank you for reading this. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Cheers, Taco. And that was it. It's much shorter than the previous one. Like the comments of it. I hope you enjoyed this. The link to this will be in the description or comment section below. And I'll see you next time. Bye.